Namaste, everybody.
Namaste.
It's Jay Rumlantini joining me for the gathering for the final one of 2024. And I wanted Jay Ram to come on with me for a very specific topic. And that topic is about the energy of relief. And before we even get into the topic, I bet you can already get a sense of what that's going to be about. And so for both of us, we have been very actively involved in the last half of this year in bringing to life the possibility and the manifestation of a documentary that's going to be happening overseas. It's going to be the filming of the origin story of Kaleidoscope Child Foundation. And when this came to be, the possibility of this came to be, none of us were prepared for the magnitude of work and just, I would say, human confrontation of everything from obstacles to victories, and the way in which that sort of puts you or puts us in a blender and just kind of pushes whirl and and the emotions and everything that go with it. And I just remember personally just coming to a point where I was so fatigued by that and so spent. And most of that, all of that, if I'm to be honest, was of my own doing and forgetting or imagining myself somehow being in control of something. And so it's been a huge lesson, right? And you have both watched and participated.
Oh, yes.
And so the energy of relief, what does that mean? So I've been thinking a lot about a story that took place many years ago. I had started a spiritual community in Mobile, Alabama. And from scratch, it was a wonderful thing. And every year on the anniversary of establishing that work, we would have like an anniversary Sunday. We would take a group photo that would show the expansion of the group every year. And I would say it was about year 3. And I had an assistant minister, and she called me. I was at home. She was at the church, and she called me and she goes, "There is a package here." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Well," and she described it as being one of those white cardboard containers, the kind that would hold one of those enlarged checks. You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
And someone had written on the outside of this cardboard envelope, "Please do not open until further notice." And it was very mysterious. And it appeared as though, in her mind, and then in my mind, once she called me, that this was something like the Publishers Clearinghouse. Do you remember that? Do you remember the Publishers Clearinghouse? And she went so far as to go on the computer and to go to Publishers Clearinghouse at the church office. And there was a green dot that was pulsating on Mobile, Alabama. And we were like, "Oh, how did this happen? Somebody nominated. What's the deal? What's going on? Publishers Clearinghouse, a check. Oh my God." And she's like, "Hurry." And so, so I get in my car and I'm driving from my house to the spiritual center. And I would say about 20 minutes. And in that 20 minutes, the energy of relief, that's the way I'm going to describe it. The energy of relief was so profound. The way in which the mind, in its imaginative state, started to envision all of the good that would derive from whatever this might be, was not only sweet and delightful, but it actually had a profound impact on my physical body, the physiology of my whole being. I could just feel myself living in that potentiality. And it was just extraordinary, to the point that when I got there, long story short, it was one of our fellow members who was the photographer of the membership photo I told you about, who had put it in there and as a little practical joke was playing mysterious. And when we discovered that that's what it was about, had a really good laugh. But that 20-minute drive was not lost on me.
Mhm.
The effect that was happening within me psychologically and physically was really so profound that I thought, how does one practice this? And that came up, that memory came up when I was reflecting upon all of the things that we have shared and gone through with the crew, with fundraising, all of the things for this documentary up until just this last week. Because you see, we're leaving in 2 days. And there is
Still a lot to do.
a lot to do. But on top of all this, there has been permits. There has been visas for filming in these countries outside the realm of normal visas. There has been at the mercy of bureaucracy and things where we've sort of thrown up our hands in the air and thought this might not happen or this person might not get to go. And there's been a lot of balls that have been juggled in the air around this. And finally, it was just then this last week, I thought, I can't keep juggling. And I thought about that story and I thought about what is it within us that overrides or forgets about the practice of the energy of relief. And so we have this thing far over in the other side of the room as our chair, and we sit in that chair every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we solve all the world's problems and have these great discussions. And so we've been talking a lot about the energy of relief. And when I bring up even that title, what were some of your first immediate thoughts around that?
Well, I think about how my consciousness gets so caught in the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget that there's this whole broader landscape. And so it gets repetitive, like the thinking gets repetitive. Oh my God, how am I going to do it? How am I going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the practice that I've done over the years has not been, I haven't gotten all the way to the relief part, which I think is just so fun to play with. I've been practicing more about the trust part.
Mm-hmm.
So, it helps me a lot when I'm anxious about something that I can't control to be like, okay, Maharaji, Baba, God, whoever, please solve this one because it's beyond me. And so that does give a little bit of relief, but it's not the same thing that you're talking about.
But it's everyone has their stepping stones, and all stepping stones are valuable. So you said something about when my consciousness latches onto a problem, and so what you're referring to is that our thinking mind seems to want to go to the problem first, more so than the solution. And then what happens with that is that it runs amok in all of the things that could go wrong. And I think we can all be transparent and agree that that's pretty much the common response when something feels scary or when something doesn't match our desire or when something feels uncontrollable, right?
Yeah, the out of control part, I think, is super, that comes into play a lot.
And so if we're really honest, think about how many times a day that happens. And when there's nothing to counter that by means of an awareness of a practice, then think about how arduous life becomes. Think about how the person, the common person just doing life, doing humanness, feels so weighted down, not just by an isolated incident of that, but the accumulation of that.
let's get back to the accumulation part in a minute. Do you want a specific example?
Yeah, give me a
So,
specific
of a
example.
specific example was, so I'm preparing for doing this with you in the shower, and I'm thinking in my mind and getting kind of angry because I have all these things to do, like the packing and the this and the all my big to-do list that has to happen before we get on a plane. And I'm like, and now David wants me to do this another thing.
Oh, wow.
I know. So getting specific, but but I realized, so then I'm like, okay, so where I wanted to examine what was going on in the mind, because that happens all the time. Not that I get mad at you all the time, but at work, the thoughts, go in a whirl. And so I kind of just started to dissect what was that all about. And I realized that it was, if I put myself into the feeling of relief, like it's all going to work out. I'm going to be on a plane in a few other hours, whether I like it or not. And it really is all going to work out. What may not work out is I might forget something. So that's a discomfort. And so I realized that it's a lot about the lack of control over the outcome. Like the outcome isn't going to match what I want it to be. And I feel like if I contract and if I control everything, then I can create this outcome at the end that I want. But it takes all the fun out of it. So I was in the shower going, "Oh, if I could just be like, oh, it's all going to work out and I'm going to do what I'm going to do and I'm going to get on the plane and it's going to be what it's going to be." I started to feel so light and so excited about the trip in general, which I have in a way that I have not felt at all in these past months of like, okay, get it all done, get it all done. And I'm just loving this idea of practicing
The energy of relief.
the energy of relief, because it brought me to a place of actual excitement to do this with you, excitement to, do the rest of the prepare. Yeah. God, it's so nice. And how many years of not doing that have
Well, I
there
mean,
been?
again, what I love about just being self-compassionate, directing compassionate towards self and the self being the human part of us is just how often we default to the management division of life. Like, I got to manage this. And so here's the paradox. Yeah, we do. There are things that we quote manage, meaning we get up in the morning and we take care of business or all the things that have to align with preparing, whether it's preparing your kids to go to school or preparing yourself for a project or preparing yourself for anything that is related to the ins and outs of the quality of your life, to big projects like what we're talking about with this documentary. You still got to prepare. But the beautiful part about that paradox is blending it with this, I guess I will just call it the just totality of surrender. I am going to show up and I'm going to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. I'm going to work with visa and permit offices and crew and fundraising, and at the same time, I'm going to see if I can practice the energy of relief, knowing that whether it does or it does not work is exactly what it's supposed to be. And I find that any spiritual topic, any principle that we profess to subscribe to, still centers around all of that. We've just described it in so many different ways, but basically it's saying, come home to the energy of relief. Come home to the energy of relief. So I was thinking that there's sort of different versions of relief. So in my world of spirituality, which was New Thought, a lot of religious science and unity, there was a running joke amongst community, those specifically who were in charge of communities, where, and if you've been in charge of any kind of committee or community, you know what I'm talking about, the troublemakers or the pot stirrers, right? And how just one person like that in the midst of a community can sway so much influence and require so much energy, particularly if we're trying to manage all of that. And so the running joke was that we prayed them to Cincinnati. or the, we call it spiritual mind treatment. So we treated them to Cincinnati, meaning that we just kind of did this affirmative prayer that this person would find their right and perfect place in the world. And I would laugh often because I'd go, oh, all those people in Cincinnati. But you get the gist of the joke is like, you pray them away, sort of. And I thought that, yeah, we can laugh at that, but that doesn't really supply a genuine sense of the type of relief I'm talking about.
It's one sort of relief.
Yeah, it's a sort of patchwork relief, if you will. Then there's the relief, and this is a real big one for all of us, is the physical pain relief. With so many people dealing with physical issues and bodily issues and chronic issues, just being aware of how that colors our sense of the world and the quality of life. Even just over this past holidays, so many people that we've known have been sick. We haven't felt 100%. And I just am thinking about, wow, imagine if not only if this was ongoing, but then you elevated this to a chronic state, how messages like this can be so seemingly insurmountable. Like the relief. If I had a moment's relief, David, yeah, but you don't understand what I go. And you're right. There have been some moments or segments or even years of time in my life where there has been those issues, but to bring the type of relief that we're talking about into that situation is a whole nother level of a practice. But that's another form of relief. And then the other one is the financial relief, or the just the survival relief, knowing so many people who go through various challenges and the ups and the downs. And oftentimes, if there's just the grabbing at enough to get by, then you have to keep going through that cycle of grabbing for relief all over again. But the common denominator of any of those categories is sitting in the energy of relief. How does one do that? Where does one begin to do that if that feels incomprehensible? How do you start? If that's what you felt compelled to tell somebody, how would you urge them to just begin where they were?
Well, like I said earlier, the stepping stone for me was kind of giving it to God.
Okay.
And that's hard with physical pain. And it's a little bit easier, I think, with the financial issues or some other issue that feels really out of control. The physical issues that's a tough curriculum. If life is a classroom, then that curriculum is master class. But Ram Dass did it. So he showed us that if you even with physical pain, there's a capacity of a human being to be able to work toward releasing the consciousness from the really contracted, like the part of that that we all experience from time to time. The chronic one's really tough. But so to say this problem's bigger than me, I offer it to my higher power and trust that the result is going to be the best and perfect thing for me, and it's going to be good. I think that has to be coupled with the knowing that it's not going to look necessarily like I think it's going to look. And so
and rarely does it.
Almost never.
Rarely does it, because the way that what you just talked about, I always see that as the phrase, the picture's in my mind. So we all have pictures in our mind, galleries of pictures in our mind of what life was supposed to look like, and rarely does it do that.
Yeah, and positively or negatively. It's almost never as disastrous as I think.
And never as,
Yeah, exactly.
colorful or with all the bows and ribbons and confetti.
Although the confetti can be like better than I could have imagined.
That too.
Yeah.
And so I think the first step is to notice the train
Hmm.
that's happening in our minds. By that meaning, just noting the endless chug, 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 chug of that motion of, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And and I would say, don't stop it. Don't try to stop it. Notice it. Notice it. I think we do ourselves a disservice when we fool ourselves into using language that says stop doing, because the mind is the mind. And as long as we're in a human body, that mind is going to chug, right? So notice the train and now begin to bring into that motion that seeming sense of relief. What does that relief feel like to you? And here's another thing. When was there a moment in your life where you felt relief?
Yeah.
Like I go back now. So what was my ground zero, if you will, this week was the memory that of that 20-minute drive. And I went, what did that feel like in that 20 minutes driving there? And I'm not in that same scenario, but I can bring and draw from that feeling.
Hmm.
And so the feeling of relief then becomes the practice, no matter what the situation is. We just described a lot of situations. We understand that everybody is where they are with those situations. Are you willing to incorporate, as we go into a new year, practicing the energy of relief? And in order to do that, I believe you have to first notice the train of thought.
That's
You have to
great.
notice
Yeah.
almost the default mechanism of worst case scenario. All aboard for worst case scenario. And you have to go, oh, and then just notice it and now couple it. Begin with coupling that with the energy of relief. And that to me is foundational.
Yeah.
And I believe that in a lot of the spiritual practices we were doing this past year, there was one particular thing in a book of Buddhist practices where the author said, "Here are 12 things to master," and then she added very wisely, "If you mastered one." Instead of becoming so overwhelmed by all 12, like, oh my God, I'll never do this. If you could master one, if you could focus on one and really see that practice through one, it's as if all the other 11 would just go, ch, 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 ch. That's what I want you to hear.
Hmm.
Don't become so inundated by um, the familiarity of defeatism. Um, And so that does require a little bit of environmental cleaning up, friends, conversations, focus, environment, all kinds of things. Begin to consciously set up an environment where you can go into your mental respite and focus on relief. And oh my gosh, what would happen if that was all we did? We don't have to figure it out. We really can't know the how of any of it, but we can be willing to sit in the energy of relief. And like you were saying, surrender that.
Hmm.
I surrender my participation in that energy to all the ways and means that know far better than me how to take relief from the intangible to the tangible. And what better practice, what better thing to commit ourselves to in the new year than that? So I wish you lots of relief in ways expected and unexpected, sweet surprises, and the ease by which your redecoration of your physical mental environment happens doesn't have to be as hard as we think that it is.
Live in the energy of relief and and that cleanup too.
And so you will probably see us on the other side of the ocean in the next month. We appreciate your prayers and your energy of support, and much love. Namaste.
Namaste.